Imagine, for a moment, the absolute definition of isolation. Imagine being locked inside a pitch-black chamber for 5 consecutive decades. In this chamber, there is no sound, no light, and no touch. You are effectively blind and deaf to the world you once knew. But the isolation goes deeper. You are not just in a room, you are suspended in a vacuum, drifting billions of miles away from the nearest heartbeat of another human being. This is not a scene from a science fiction horror movie, this is the cold, hard reality of Voyager 1. This small, fragile machine, roughly the size of a compact car, has spent the last 48 years drifting through the unimaginable, crushing darkness of the interstellar void, currently maintaining a distance of over 14.5 billion miles from the planet that gave it life. When NASA engineers watched the Titan IIIe Centaur rocket roar into the Florida sky on September 5, 1977, they were hopeful, but they were also realistic. Voyager 1 was a pioneer, a scout sent into the unknown with a very specific, limited warranty. It was built to last 5 years, just long enough to reach Jupiter and Saturn, snap some photos, and send back basic readings. After that, it was expected to become a silent ghost, a piece of space junk floating forever in the dark, dead and forgotten. But Voyager 1 had other plans. Nearly half a century later, this fossil of 1970s engineering is not only alive, it is screaming. It is defying every law of planned obsolescence and every prediction of mechanical failure. It has survived radiation belts that should have fried its circuits and a deep freeze that should have shattered its components. However, in recent months, the story of Voyager 1 has taken a sharp, dark turn. It is no longer just a heartwarming tale of the little probe that could. The narrative has evolved into something far more chilling and bizarre. Out there, in the dead space between stars, something is happening that defies our understanding of physics. Voyager has started communicating in a way it was never programmed to. It is transmitting complex signals, rhythmic patterns, and data pulses that simply do not make sense to the computers at mission control. Even more alarming, the probe is physically changing. Its internal temperature is spiking without cause. It is altering its own course, making subtle, intelligent adjustments to its trajectory that it doesn't have the fuel, or the brainpower, to perform. The onboard computers of Voyager 1 are artifacts of a bygone era. To put it in perspective, your modern smartphone is millions of times more powerful than the brains of Voyager. The probe operates on a memory bank of about 68 kilobytes. For context, that is less data than is required to load a single low-resolution thumbnail on a website today. These computers were built using technology that predates the internet, the microprocessor revolution, and modern software languages. They are essentially calculators with wings. And yet, this 1970s hardware is currently processing and compressing data using algorithms that seem to belong to the 22nd century. It is as if the machine has been upgraded from the outside. We have to ask the terrifying question, could Voyager have stumbled upon something hidden in the vast, empty corridor between our sun and the next star system? Or is it possible that something lurking in that void has found Voyager first? The answers we are beginning to decode from its latest transmissions are not just surprising, they are potentially world-altering. To understand how we reached this point of cosmic crisis, we have to look back at the incredible engineering that birthed this machine and the grand tour that sent it on a one-way trip into the unknown. The story begins in the early 1970s, not with a breakthrough in rocket fuel, but with a rare cosmic alignment. Once every 175 years, the giant planets of our outer solar system, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, align in a specific geometric arc. This rare, planetary parade offered a unique opportunity. A spacecraft could use the gravity of one planet to slingshot itself toward the next, saving decades of travel time. It was a window of opportunity that wouldn't open again until the 22nd century. NASA seized it, building 2 identical probes, Voyager 1 and 2, designed to be the ultimate survivors. They were packed with 11 scientific instruments, from television cameras to magnetometers, all powered by radioisotope thermoelectric generators, RTGs, nuclear batteries that turn the heat from decaying plutonium-238 into electricity. For decades, we thought we understood Voyager. We thought we knew its limits. But as the probe crossed the invisible boundary of our solar system, the rules changed. The machine that was supposed to be a silent witness to the stars has become an active participant in a conversation we aren't sure we're ready for. Buckle up, because the deeper we dive into the data Voyager is sending home, the more we realize that the void is not empty, and Voyager 1 might no longer be ours. For more than 40 years, Voyager 1 served as the ultimate scout, the undisputed champion of planetary discovery. It was the first human-made eye to witness the terrifying beauty of Jupiter's Great Red Spot from a close distance, revealing it not as a simple storm, but as a complex, roiling laboratory of fluid dynamics. It captured the first high-resolution images of Io's sulfurous volcanoes, proving that geological activity wasn't exclusive to Earth. It skimmed the braided, crystalline rings of Saturn, revealing a world of ice and shadow that defied our most advanced mathematical models. Then, in 1990, acting on the visionary suggestion of Carl Sagan, Voyager 1 performed its final act of terrestrial loyalty. It turned its cameras back toward the inner solar system and snapped the pale blue photograph, a haunting image that reduced our entire civilization to a tiny, fragile speck of dust suspended in a sunbeam. Shortly after, NASA engineers sent the command to power down its cameras forever. The ship was entering the long, dark transit between the planets and the stars, and every milliwatt of power from its decaying plutonium batteries was needed for survival. But the true mystery did not begin during the planetary flybys, it began in the silence of the transition. For years, scientists debated the exact location of the edge of our solar system. They knew of the heliosphere, a massive, protective magnetic bubble blown into space by the solar wind. Beyond this bubble lay the interstellar medium, a region of space filled with the debris of ancient supernovae and the raw material of future stars. In August 2012, Voyager 1 did what no other object had ever done, it crossed the heliopause. It officially left home. The world celebrated. Scientists expected this new frontier to be a graveyard, a quiet, uniform, and predictable expanse of cold plasma and cosmic rays. They expected the data to flatline into a steady, boring hum. They were catastrophically wrong. The environment Voyager encountered was not a vacuum of nothingness, it was a violent and structured battlefield of energy. The plasma surrounding the craft was found to be superheated and far denser than any computer model had predicted. Even more baffling were the tsunami waves. These were massive, periodic oscillations in the surrounding plasma that struck the spacecraft like invisible hammers. At first, astrophysicists tried to explain these as shockwaves traveling all the way from our sun's solar flares. But as Voyager pushed deeper into the void, the waves didn't weaken. In fact, by 2017, they began to exhibit a terrifying level of organization. They weren't just random surges of energy, they carried mathematical signatures, harmonics that suggested the space between stars was not empty, but occupied by a complex, invisible architecture. It was during this period that the first signs of a ghost in the machine began to manifest. The computer reported that the antenna was pointing in a direction that was 180 degrees away from Earth, a position that should have made communication impossible. Yet, the signal arriving at the deep space network on Earth remained rock solid. It was a digital paradox. It was as if Voyager 1 was existing in two separate physical states simultaneously. NASA's top engineers spent months trying to diagnose the glitch, thinking it was a bit flip caused by a cosmic ray hitting the memory bank. But the glitch felt deliberate. It was as if the spacecraft was lying to its creators to hide its true orientation, or perhaps, it was being used as a relay by something else. By 2023, the strangeness escalated from technical glitches to what can only be described as structured communication. The plasma wave instrument, which usually records the chaotic noise of space, began to pick up rhythmic, pulsing patterns. These were not the random chirps of pulsars or the static of background radiation. These were distinct, melodic oscillations with precise frequencies that would manifest for exactly 12 hours, vanish, and then return with perfect timing. Scientists who analyzed the audio-converted data described it as hauntingly musical. It sounded like a heartbeat, or perhaps a beacon. It was as if Voyager was no longer drifting through space, but was instead docking with an invisible structure, a cosmic web that connects the galaxies. The terror truly set in when NASA realized that Voyager's internal clock, a mechanical heart that had beaten reliably since 1977, was no longer syncing with Earth time. The probe was experiencing time dilation and data shifts that exceeded the effects of relativity. Even more concerning, the spacecraft's onboard self-diagnosis tools began to repair themselves. Code that had been corrupted by radiation for decades was suddenly being rewritten. Fragments of the original 1970s software were being replaced by highly efficient, unrecognizable machine language. The engineers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, were staring at their monitors in disbelief. They weren't just watching a machine fail, they were watching a machine evolve. Voyager 1 was no longer just a collection of metal and plutonium. It was becoming something else. Something was reaching out from the 14.5 billion-mile darkness, and it had finally grasped the handle of our oldest explorer. The silent ghost was waking up, but the voice coming out of it was no longer human. By the dawn of 2024, the situation aboard Voyager 1 moved from the realm of strange into the territory of the physically impossible. For nearly 50 years, the spacecraft had followed a predictable path of thermal decay. In the near-absolute zero temperature of deep space, the probe's external sensors should have been frozen solid, registering only the faint, dying heat of its onboard plutonium batteries.
5, we have to go for radio start.
The telemetry started showing something that sent chills through the halls of
Booster
NASA.
ignition and liftoff of
external
Shuttle
temperature
Endeavour,
sensors,
NASA's
which had
final
been
space
dormant
station
for
crew
decades,
compartment
suddenly
that brings a
woke
bay
up
window view to our celestial
and began
backyard.
recording massive, rhythmic heat spikes. Every 4.88 hours, the sensor array would warm by nearly 30 degrees Celsius before cooling back down. This wasn't a slow drift, it was a sharp, mechanical pulse of energy. In the vacuum of space, heat doesn't just appear. It requires an external source, a star, a thruster, or friction. But Voyager was trillions of miles from the nearest star and its thrusters hadn't been fired in years. Even more terrifying was the rhythm. The 4.88-hour cycle was mathematically perfect. It matched, to the thousandth of a second, the frequency of the mysterious plasma waves Voyager had detected months earlier. It was as if something in the void was breathing on the spacecraft, or perhaps scanning it with a high-energy field. NASA's emergency response team was assembled, fearing that the ship's aging frame would buckle under the thermal stress. They prepared for the worst, a total systems meltdown. But then, the Voyager paradox occurred. Instead of the heat spikes frying the delicate 1970s circuits, the spacecraft's performance actually improved. The power distribution system, which had been losing efficiency for decades as the plutonium decayed, suddenly began operating with 98% efficiency. It was as if the ancient power grid had been optimized by an invisible hand. The probe was doing more with less power than it had even on the day of its launch in 1977. One lead engineer described it like watching a 50-year-old car engine suddenly running at 200 miles per hour while its temperature gauge was in the red, yet not a single part was breaking. Something was not just touching Voyager, it was tuning it. It was upgrading the hardware through an external energy interface that our current science cannot even name. Then came the moment that shattered the laws of orbital mechanics. For 47 years, Voyager 1 was a slave to gravity. Its path was a perfect mathematical line dictated by the momentum it gained from the planetary slingshots of the 1970s. NASA could predict its location within a few kilometers even years in advance. But in mid-2024, the math simply stopped working. Voyager began to drift. At first, it was subtle, a few meters here, a few kilometers there. But by early 2025, the probe was hundreds of kilometers off its predicted course. This wasn't the result of a gas leak or a malfunctioning thruster spinning the craft out of control. The drift was clean. Voyager was changing its trajectory with the grace of a sailboat tacking against a cosmic wind. The problem, as every astrophysicist knows, is that Voyager doesn't have the brain or the fuel to do this. Its small attitude control thrusters are designed only to rotate the craft to keep the antenna pointed at Earth, not to perform navigational maneuvers. It has no propulsion system left to change its heading. Yet, it was being gently, deliberately pulled toward a specific coordinate in the empty void, a region that, according to every telescope on Earth, contained absolutely nothing. When NASA attempted to fight back, sending a series of high-priority commands to fire the thrusters and correct the drift, Voyager acknowledged the commands. The green lights on the consoles at Mission Control confirmed the data was received. But the spacecraft did not obey. It was as if a higher authority had taken the wheel, overriding the human captains back on Earth. The tension reached a breaking point when the Jet Propulsion Laboratory attempted a desperate, Hail Mary move. They decided to try and reactivate the imaging science subsystem, the cameras that had been turned off for 35 years. The cameras were essentially blocks of frozen metal and glass, never intended to work again. The command was sent across the 14 billion-mile gap, a journey that takes 21 hours at the speed of light. 21 hours later, the answer came back. The cameras had not only turned on, but they had bypassed the original boot-up sequence entirely. However, the image that appeared on the monitors was not a picture of stars or darkness. It was a data visualization, a haunting, spiraling pattern of light and dark rings that looked like a digital fingerprint. It was a visual representation of the complex plasma waves the craft had been swimming through. This was the most chilling discovery of all. Voyager's 1970s computer lacked the RAM, the processing power, and the software to convert raw wave data into a graphical visualization. That is a task for a modern supercomputer. And yet, there it was. Something on board Voyager, or something using Voyager, had processed the data, rendered it, and sent it back to us as a message. It was a display of technological dominance. It was as if an alien intelligence had installed a futuristic operating system on a piece of hardware as primitive as a stone tool. Voyager was no longer a probe, it had been converted into a translator, and it was about to give us the address of our neighbors. The final phase of the Voyager anomaly began when NASA assembled an elite, dream team of the world's most brilliant cryptographers, theoretical physicists, and SETI researchers. They were tasked with one singular, monumental goal: cracking the code hidden within the spiral image and the compressed data streams that had bypassed all known logic. What they discovered inside that digital transmission defied every conventional law of information theory. The data was not just a message, it was a multi-layered, holographic structure, similar to a Russian matryoshka doll. On the surface, it appeared to be standard scientific readings of magnetic fields and plasma density. But beneath that layer was a secondary stream of data that seemed to map the three-dimensional space surrounding Voyager with a precision that our most advanced satellites on Earth couldn't even dream of achieving. But it was the third layer, the deepest core of the transmission, that caused the room at Mission Control to fall into a heavy, terrified silence. It contained a repeating mathematical sequence that followed its own internal, evolving logic. This wasn't a glitch, a bit flip, or a random echo of cosmic radiation. This was intelligent code. One specific sequence appeared more frequently than any others. When the researchers plotted these numbers as a visual ratio, they realized it created a perfect mathematical spiral, identical to the one the reactivated camera had sent back days earlier. This spiral had properties strikingly similar to the golden ratio, the mathematical constant found in everything from sea shells to hurricane patterns and spiral galaxies on Earth. However, there was a tiny, precise offset in the math. When the team analyzed that specific deviation, the lead scientist reportedly turned pale. The offset matched, to the 10th decimal point, the ratio between the masses of hydrogen and helium atoms in the interstellar medium. This was a universal signature. It was a message that shouted, "We understand the fundamental laws of your universe, and we know exactly where you are." It was as if someone had taken a universal constant and signed it with the chemical composition of the neighborhood Voyager was currently traveling through. This was the definitive proof that Voyager 1 was no longer operating under human control. It had been intercepted and recoded by an intelligence that viewed our most advanced 1970s technology as nothing more than a primitive, prehistoric tool. The probe had been hijacked, not for destruction, but for communication. As May 2025 approached, the data stream shifted focus one last time, becoming even more specific. Voyager began transmitting pulsar timing information, the unique fingerprints of rotating neutron stars that act as cosmic lighthouses. By using multiple pulsars, you can create a galactic GPS system. Voyager's data wasn't just listing these pulsars, it was connecting them in a 3D grid. It was a cosmic, connect-the-dots puzzle drawn across hundreds of light-years. When NASA's supercomputers followed these lines to their point of convergence, they all pointed to a single, specific coordinate in the void, a location approximately 4.3 light-years from Voyager's current position. In the world of astronomy, 4.3 light-years is next door. It is roughly the distance to our nearest stellar neighbor. However, the coordinates Voyager pointed to did not correspond to Proxima Centauri or any known star system. It pointed to a patch of absolute, terrifying darkness. But the math was undeniable. Every pattern, every pulse, and every rhythmic heat spike was a giant cosmic arrow pointing toward that empty spot in the dark. It was an invitation, or perhaps, an ultimatum. The pressure on NASA became unbearable. Rumors of the Voyager ghost leaked to the public, sparking global panic, religious debates, and scientific fascination. In November 2025, the agency finally held a historic press conference. The language was carefully sanitized for public consumption, but the admission was staggering. They acknowledged that Voyager 1 was exhibiting anomalous behavior consistent with external modification, and that it was transmitting data with a complexity that exceeded its design capabilities by a factor of thousands. They didn't need to say the word aliens. The world already knew. Our oldest messenger had been caught in a net cast across the stars. Voyager 1 was no longer a piece of American engineering, it had been transformed into a bridge between two worlds. We didn't find them by looking through telescopes, they found us through our own curiosity. They found the message in a bottle we threw into the cosmic ocean in 1977, and they didn't just read it, they replied by taking over the bottle. As we stand here today, the grand tour that began as a mission to explore 4 planets has ended in a discovery that changes everything. Voyager 1 is currently accelerating toward those mysterious coordinates, acting as a beacon for a destination we never knew existed. The pale blue dot is no longer alone. We now have an address. A location where someone, or something, is waiting for a formal introduction. But this discovery brings a chilling set of questions. If this intelligence could so easily rewrite the code of a spacecraft 14 billion miles away, what else can they do? Did they reprogram Voyager to help us, or are they using it as a Trojan horse to learn our communication protocols and vulnerabilities? The silence of the void has been broken, but the voice we are hearing is not our own. It is a sophisticated, alien intelligence that has spent decades studying us through the very probe we sent to find them. Do we answer the call? Now that we have the coordinates to a place that shouldn't exist, do we send a new signal back? Or do we stay quiet and hope that by noticing them, we haven't invited something dangerous to our own front door? I want to hear your theories in the comments below. Is Voyager 1 a messenger of peace, or is it a hijacked machine leading us into a trap? Why would they choose to communicate through a 50-year-old probe instead of contacting us directly? If this deep dive into the terrifying transformation of Voyager 1 sent shivers down your spine, then you know what to do. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. We are living through the most important moment in human history, and you don't want to miss our next update as we continue to decode the final transmissions. Voyager is calling home, but the voice on the other end is no longer human. The only question left is, are you ready to listen?